Alexander the Great conquered most of the known world before he turned 30. Not with an empire already handed to him, not after decades of planning. He built it while sprinting, and somehow, he still didn't live long enough to finish. This is not the story of how Alexander won the world. It's the story of what it cost him to try. History can't quite agree on what he was. A genius? A tyrant? A god with bad impulse control? Maybe all three. Alexander was born in 356 BCE in Pella, Macedonia, a place the rest of Greece politely looked down on. Think militarized border state, not cultural capital. Which meant Alexander didn't grow up learning how to debate. He grew up learning how to dominate. His father, Philip II, was a brutal reformer who turned Macedonia into the most dangerous army in Europe. His mother, Olympias, was intense. The kind of person who didn't say, "My son is special." She said, "Zeus got involved." This matters, because Alexander didn't conquer the world by accident. He was raised to think it was owed to him. When Alexander was 13, Philip hired Aristotle to tutor him. Yes, that Aristotle. Philosopher, scientist, one of the sharpest minds in human history. Basically handed a teenage warlord in training and told, "Good luck." Aristotle taught Alexander logic, medicine, ethics, and Homer. And Alexander didn't just admire Achilles, he internalized him. Glory over safety. Legacy over lifespan. To Alexander, a short legendary life beat a long forgettable one. And this belief will quietly explain every reckless decision he makes later. At 16, Alexander was left in charge of Macedonia while Philip went campaigning. Most teens get house rules. Alexander crushed a rebellion, wiped out a Thracian tribe, and founded a city named after himself. Which sounds arrogant, until you realize he'd do it again, and again, and again. Historians stopped counting at some point. At 18, he charged at the Battle of Chaeronea and shattered the sacred band of Thebes, an elite unit famous for never breaking. They broke. Greece noticed. Philip smiled. Then the family imploded. Philip divorced Olympias, married again. Suddenly, Alexander's claim to the throne looked shaky. A drunken argument at a wedding escalated into drawn swords, and Alexander and his mother fled into exile. They reconciled, but trust was gone. In 336 BCE, Philip II was assassinated. Alexander was 20. And what he did next tells you exactly who he was. The army backed him instantly. Possible rivals, executed. Threats, eliminated. Opposition factions, erased. Efficiency over mercy. Greece thought Macedonia might wobble. Thebes revolted. Alexander marched 240 miles in about 2 weeks and showed up like a historical jump scare. Thebes refused to surrender. Alexander erased the city. Temples spared. A poet's house spared. Everyone else? Not so lucky. After this, Greece didn't rebel again. They didn't need to. Now Alexander turned east. Persia, the superpower, the old enemy, the richest prize imaginable. Also, Alexander was broke. Empires are expensive. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed into Asia with about 35,000 fighting troops. Not huge, but terrifyingly balanced. Heavy infantry, shock cavalry, archers, engineers, and historians? Yup, historians. Alexander didn't just want to win. He wanted receipts. At the Granicus River, Alexander nearly died in his first major battle. Persian soldiers tried to kill him during the river crossing. He survived. Barely. Then he counterattacked and obliterated them. Western Asia Minor collapsed. Cities opened their gates. Tyrants fled. Alexander installed democracies loudly, while quietly ruling everything himself. Public image. Excellent. Actual control. Absolute. Then Darius III arrived, the great king of Persia. They met at Issus. Alexander charged directly at Darius. Darius panicked and ran, leaving his family behind. Alexander treated them with respect, and with that, defeated Persia politically, not just militarily. Legend spread faster than armies. At this point, Alexander could have chased Darius. Instead, he did something smarter. He suffocated Persia. Alexander marched down the Mediterranean coast, capturing ports and cutting off the Persian navy. City after city surrendered, until Tyre. Tyre said no. Tyre was an island fortress. So Alexander built a road through the sea. 7 months later, Tyre fell. Historians still argue whether this was genius or pure spite-powered stubbornness. Probably both. Egypt welcomed Alexander as a liberator. He was crowned pharaoh, founded Alexandria. Yes, that Alexandria. Then he visited an oracle in the desert who greeted him as the son of a god. Alexander never denied it. Not once. By this point, Alexander wasn't chasing conquest anymore. He was chasing identity. In 331 BCE, Alexander faced Darius again at Gaugamela. Darius had numbers. Alexander had tactics, timing, and terrifying confidence. Alexander won. Babylon fell. Susa surrendered. Persepolis burned. The Persian Empire was over. This is where most stories end, but Alexander's doesn't. Because now, he had nothing left to conquer, but himself. Alexander stopped acting like a Greek general and started acting like a universal king. Persian officials, Persian dress, Persian customs. His Macedonian soldiers hated it. Arguments turned into executions. One night, drunk and furious, Alexander killed Cletus, a man who had once saved his life. The next morning, Alexander collapsed in grief, but he didn't undo the path he was on. He marched east, through deserts, through mountains, through revolts that refused to stay dead. He married Roxana, executed rivals, adopted Persian court rituals, tried to make Macedonians bow to him like a god. They laughed. Alexander backed down, but the distance between king and army was growing. Then came India, new terrain, new enemies, war elephants. At the Hydaspes River, Alexander defeated King Porus in one of his greatest battles, then spared him and made him an ally. Alexander respected strength, even when it tried to crush him. But when Alexander wanted to go farther east, his army refused. They had followed him to the edge of the world. They would not go beyond it. For the first time in his life, Alexander lost. The journey back was brutal. Deserts killed thousands. Floods wiped out camps. Alexander himself was nearly killed again. Back in Babylon, he tried to fuse his empire into one people. Mass marriages, shared power. His army mutinied. Alexander broke them emotionally, then reconciled. It worked. For now. Then Hephaestion died. Alexander unraveled. He demanded divine honors. Some cities complied sincerely, others creatively. Sparta famously replied, "Since Alexander wishes to be a god, let him be a god." In 323 BCE, after a long night of drinking, Alexander fell ill. 10 days later, he was dead, 32 years old, no heir, no plan, no replacement. The empire shattered, but the world never reset. Greek culture spread across Asia. Trade exploded, ideas mixed, civilizations fused. Alexander didn't just conquer land, he bent history. And then he vanished, leaving the world to deal with the consequences.